see the life story of the person who wrote the Lord of the Rings trilogy, J.R.R. Tolkien. He passed through he went through the wars, the world wars, right? He lost many friends in there. He genuinely suffered, right? But you look at his books, they're all of nobility, of strong characters, both male and female. You'll not get moksha just because you worship a particular god. It doesn't work that way. Because even gods are subject to the laws of cause and effect. They're subject to the laws of karma. You remember at the end of the Mahabharata, Lord Krishna was cursed by Ma Gandhari, right? And what was Lord Krishna's reaction to that? Ma Gandhari was a woman, was just a human being. Lord Krishna was God himself. A human being cursed God. What did God do? What did Lord Krishna do? He didn't say, how dare you, this blasphemy. No. He told Ma Gandhari, Ma, as you wish.
Amish Tripathi is one of the most renowned authors that India has ever produced. His books are loved all over India and now all over the globe as well. This particular conversation was an attempt to learn more from his research material, because in order to write the number of books that this man has written about Indian culture, you need to have done a lot of research. So this one's a deep dive into his research as well as his mind. And of course, because it's TRS, we spoke about some slightly edgier, slightly darker concepts as well. Lots of talk about death, lots of talk about the power of the divine feminine in Indian culture. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this particular episode. Remember to check out and buy Amish sir's book, The War of Lanka. It's out now. And remember to follow TRS on Spotify. Spotify exclusive, which means that every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. This one's another Amish Tripathi and Ranveer special on The Ranveer Show. Enjoy yourselves.
Amish Tripathi, sir.
In the house.
I want to go with a dark vibe for this episode. Bhoot, Pret, Asura.
As long as we are not going into the dark web.
No. That we do with cybersecurity, folks. You're one of my absolute favorite guests to have on the show. We've done, I think, 2 or 3 epic episodes till this point, sir. Back then, during the pandemic, the trends were very much Indian culture related. We have to create episodes according to the trends of our times. And as you can see
from around us, it's all about darkness. It's all about darkness.
Darkness is the trend. Why do you think the world is fascinated with bhoot, pret, pishach, demons?
Nahi aave. There's a theory in our ancient Indian way, right? That we know that Lord Ganesh is the remover of obstacles. Right? What many don't know is that from many of the Puranic stories, Lord Ganesh is also the placer of obstacles.
Really?
Right? The belief in our ancient way used to be that if you don't have obstacles, if you don't have real problems in life, right? Because that's what makes life, right? Say life has become so privileged that the brain goes into a spiral, because you're not actually facing quote unquote real problems, right? You're not facing, you don't have a shortage of money. I mean, the government is taking care of any medical necessities, or you get a minimum, allowance that the government gives you every week. So the brain goes into a spiral, and you see that. And I'm living in London right now. I'm there as in a diplomatic role. And I find that even more, and in that sense, it's a little troubling, a little sad that I find that many of the youngsters in the West, it is in many ways a very angry generation. And it's among the things that's spoken of, out there in media and many other places. There is a desire for dark content, so even the kind of Netflix, Amazon Prime series that are coming out, the kind of music, you see the kind of words that are there in the music. But if you see their real life, many of those youngsters in the West, as compared to how youngsters are living in poorer countries, right? Where they are worried about whether their parents will have enough money to send them to school, let alone a good school, right? So in many of the poorer countries, like in Africa, for example, when COVID hit, many of them didn't have vaccines. You know that. I mean, India actually sent vaccines as aid to many African countries. But despite that, you see the youngsters in Africa, you see in India, you see street children. I do charity work in London as well. I've gone with, there are these NGOs who go and distribute food. I'm sure you've heard of Akshay Patra, right? The Indian NGO which distributes, and they do wonderful work distributing food in India. Many don't know they're there in the UK as well. And there's a problem of homelessness and a lack of food in many of these places. I have done charity in India too, and charity is not just about giving money. You need to go give your time. You need to talk to people, and I found that many of the people who live on the streets in India have this gung-ho spirit. All of them know that we're going to be off the streets in a few years. We're going to rise. You see the children, they're bubbly, they're enthusiastic. But I found when I went in London, many of the street people, they're largely men actually, very few women. 90% of the people I saw were men or young boys. And in many ways, they were almost broken.
Lost hope.
Yeah, it was almost depressing, talking to them. And has the society, in the privileged sections, has it become, that they are almost finding problems because there are no real problems, and many of the poor in the West are really being left behind, and there's a loss of a sense of hope. So is that leading to, seeing the entire world in a dark place? When actually, if you think about it, the world has enough money. We have generated enough wealth over the last 100, 200 years to take care of everyone, actually, right? I think it's a cycle in a way that you want real problems because that creates better people, right? How do you build muscle? You're a good, one can see that, I'm obviously not that well built, but how do you build muscle? You build it against resistance, right? You need resistance. If your body doesn't face real resistance, what happens to your muscles? It atrophies, right? So I'm wondering if life and the mind is also like that.
And God is in that zone where he's throwing difficulties.
Yeah, and that's what Lord Ganesh is, that's what we are taught in the Puranas, that he wasn't just a remover of obstacles, he was a placer of obstacles as well. That resistance training strengthens your soul, it strengthens your mind. I've gone through, I've spoken about it a few times, I don't like speaking about it too much, but I've had a very difficult 7-8 years, the last years in my personal life, and the career has, every year has been better than the previous year. God couldn't be more kind. But in my personal life, like one tragedy after another, I lost people that I really admire, close families, some in very tragic ways. To the extent that there was a time, I'm a very devout Lord Shiva worshipper. I pray every morning. I do the Maha Mrityunjay Jap every morning. There was one morning I just looked up and I just screamed like, just stop. I can't take it anymore. Just stop. How much will you test? And our entire family, all of us suffered a great deal. Now, what are the things which get you through this? Again, I'm talking about some parts of the world where you find this desire for dark content even more. You find even among elite classes in India. Part of what gets people like me, and what happens to some people, you pass through this, wo sade saathi jo bolte hain na, pass through a phase, you're just tired, ek ke baad ek. Some or the other tragedy keeps hitting, and some.
Why don't you explain a little bit of what sade saathi is?
So there's this thing that you go through this phase in life where the planets are against you and testing you.
I believe it's also for either 7 months or 7 years or some
7 years
quantum of 7.
And our entire family, we went through, and one after the other, we just and when a new thing would hit, it would almost be like abhi to aur kuch to hona hi tha. What got us through this was the fact that our family is very close, right? What gets you through difficult times is having people you love around you and having things to do which you love, right? And look, and all your, social media, all this, I have so many followers. They are not your friends, boss. They're not people you love, right? On Instagram or wherever. I'm not deriding those. There's a value to that. But the number of people who will die for you without a second thought and the number of people you will die for without a second thought, those are the people you love. And that's never more than the number of fingers in your hand, right? 100%. Very few people, right? And having something that you love doing, right? Like for me, I'm lucky. I mean, I write. I love doing it. Right? Even if I didn't make, I'm lucky I make money from it. Even if I didn't make money from it, I do a banking job. I do some other job, but I keep writing. Right? Having something that you love doing, and having the small number of people who you deeply love, who you'll die for without a second thought. Right? That is what gets you through life. Whether you have real problems or you don't have real problems.
So
I think that's missing in modern day, in our modern lifestyle.
Yeah. Again, this is sounding like I'm going to highlight and champion India and Indian culture in this conversation, and I'm totally doing that. If we zoom out a little bit, okay, this is your one life as Amish Tripathi, but this is not your only life of your soul. You've had lives before. You're probably going to have lives after, unless you go around a deep Kriya Yoga path and then start meditating and gain
So
moksha.
calm the shit down. That's the point.
No, I mean, I also, yes, that, we had BK Shivani on the show. And I asked her, what's the purpose of space? Why does the universe, why do all these stars and galaxies exist? And she gave a long explanation, but my takeaway was that it's kind of God's way of saying, hey, your problems are like really small. Like that there's a lot of other stuff out there. Now, when you actually zoom out of your perspective of life in this lifetime as a man, and you look at your overall lifetimes as a soul, I want to understand suffering from there. None of us could have been completely clean people in all our lifetimes. We all would have done mistakes. That's why we're still in this realm.
Yeah.
Do you think of the higher realm? Do you think of what's next? Because you're diving into these subjects of Shiva and Vishnu and seven planes, etc. And this is something I've been thinking about so much that why the fuck am I trying to make money?
The thing is, what is the purpose of your life? Is it to earn money or actually do something which gives your life purpose? Right?
I feel if you think that the purpose of your life is to make money, you're wasting time and not pursuing the actual purpose, which is getting the hell out of here.
Okay, let me tell you a few things the way our ancestors look at it. But before that, let me tell you something intriguing, because most of your listeners would of course know Lord of the Rings and would know Game of Thrones. Now, see the life story of the person who wrote the Lord of the Rings trilogy, J.R.R. Tolkien. He passed through he went through the wars, the world wars, right? He lost many friends in there. He genuinely suffered, right? But you look at his books, they're all of nobility, of strong characters, both male and female, of the right way to live, moralistic, right? And you see George R.R. Martin, right? He's a baby boomer, among the most privileged generations in human history. He dodged the draft from what one knows. He never saw war. Very peaceful, very wonderful life. And look at his books. Dark, lack of morality. There's almost no character who has any, real nobility, who'll not let circumstances make him or her do things which he knows he should not do. Right? So is it that suffering makes a person noble? Is that the lesson from J.R.R. Tolkien? And is it that you've had no real problems, so you think, there are no morals, do whatever the hell you want?
Do you have any input to that question?
There is suffering exists for a purpose. That's what I was, saying in from earlier. Suffering actually makes you noble. Like I said, resistance makes your soul stronger, right? If you get so much suffering that your soul just breaks, that happens to some people. Sometimes you just can't handle it anymore. But if you have no real suffering, then like what you see in Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah.
No one has any sense of morality, out there. And how will you build a good world like that? Going back to this, the thing of making money. One of our principles our ancestors used to say was that to lead a good life, you need to follow the 4 Purusharthas, right? And you need to find balance between all 4 of them. Purush, in this context, is not male. Purush is life energy, and Artha, right? So what are the 4 Purusharthas? The first is Artha, which is wealth, power. You need that, right? So in India was a poor country for many centuries, and frankly, no one cared about how deep our philosophies were, right? So you need Artha. Then you need Kama. And Kama is misread as just eroticism. It's not that. It's all the sensual pleasures of life. Music, dance, everything which makes life beautiful, which brings out the rasas of life, right?
Which brings out our feel-good hormones.
Exactly. You need that too. Third, you need dharma, right? And dharma erroneously translated as religion very often. Dharma is that which balances, that which sustains, that which is the right thing to do. Right? That's what dharma is. So if you're making money by doing smuggling, that's not dharma. Right? And the fourth is moksha, which is not to die, and there is no ultimate kingdom where you'll have fairies forever. I mean, in this concept, right? You want to have a death which ends all deaths, right? Because there's this lovely line Socrates had said that death may be the greatest of all human blessings. But actually, the greatest blessing is a death to end all deaths. When you don't have to die again and again and again. You need to find that balance so that you can get moksha, you can get nirvana. So our ancestors believed that you need all four. You need artha, you need kama, you need dharma, you need moksha. And when you have all four, then it's a good life, right? And all four in balance. You find so many people who've just focusing on earning money, right? They're not enjoying the rasas of life. There's no dharma in their life. They're so unhappy, right? And you find someone who just says, I'm going to give it all up, and live in the mountains, live in a cave, but they're actually thinking about their friends who are, partying. Are they happy too? Right? So you need a balance of all four. That's what our ancestors told us.
So, I mean, I don't know if this is just a reflection of my own character, but I feel anyone who's inclined towards spiritualism of any form, and you are one of those people, is always inclined towards studies related to darkness. For example, I'm doing it through the show. I'm sure that when you're writing books, there are certain dark research topics you go about. At this stage of your life, you're in your 40s?
I'm 47.
At 47, are you learning about new forms of darkness? Like, are you thinking more about death? Like, is Garud Puran a part of, your studies?
Yeah, I've thought of death a lot in the last 7-8 years. Like I said, I've lost too many people, and like I said, some in very tragic ways, and people I really admired, and at some levels you think maybe the other side is better, but that's not a good conversation to have. But there is no as you get deeper into our philosophies, you realize there's no need to fear death, right? Because it's not that, at least in the pagan way, what is pejoratively called pagan. I mean, the entire world was pagan once upon a time. India is the only, among the few pre-Bronze Age cultures, the only pre-Bronze Age culture that has still survived, and among the few pagan cultures that is still alive. Japan is, of course, an ancient way. China is an ancient way, but they're not pre-Bronze Age. We're the only pre-Bronze Age one. And the pagan ways across, like even in the Greco-Roman world, death was just seen as long sleep, right? When you sleep, when you are in REM sleep, you do know the body gets paralyzed, right? The brain releases.
It switches off your motor.
Yeah, which paralyzes your body. Is that a form of death? Why does the brain do that? Because that's when you're dreaming, so that you don't act out your dreams and hurt yourself. So our ancestors thought, is that like a mini death? And you do need to sleep, because if you do know that if you don't sleep, you'll die. You'll destroy your health. Sleep is very, very important. So if you see it from that perspective, from the way of our ancestors, is death just a recharge time for the soul, right? You're in Pitralok, you're in the land of the ancestors. It's believed that 3 generations stay in Pitralok, and there the concept of time is very different from our concept of time. Time is not, moving in a linear manner.
Can you talk a little bit about Pitralok?
So Pitralok in our way, in the way of the dharmic religions, which is Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, is where the ancestral souls go, right? After death. And you'll notice, the Pitru Paksh happens just before the Navratri. And you don't start any new activity at that time. And you feed crows, because it's believed that they carry nutrition to our ancestors. And it's believed that 3 generations of our ancestors stay in Pitralok. There are many theories. This is one among them. And that beyond that, they either get moksha or they come back, right, to earth because they have a next life.
How do they get
to live.
moksha up there?
Well, the theory is because the soul has found balance.
In
Right.
Pitrulok.
No, and at the end of this life.
Okay.
So then you're on,
Got
right?
it.
And the concept of bodhisattva was that that's a soul that has found balance already, but does not want to take moksha, wants to come back and help others.
Okay.
Right.
This
Okay.
concept of finding balance, it's not just through meditation.
No.
So
It's
what is it through?
Finding balance through all the karma that you do, right? It's essentially in a way kind of wiping out all debts, right? If you think about it, if I've in the normal financial world, I've taken a loan from you, right? So I have a debt, right? And I need to pay that off. Well, in the karmic world, it is like someone has given me charity, someone has helped. I have a karmic debt, I need to pay that off, right? I need to make sure I don't take on any further debt. So do as much good as I can. When you lead that noble life and you balanced out all your past karma, then you get moksha, right? That's a concept. And when you can find, and that's among the things, of course, you need to train your soul to be in a higher place as well. There are various things that's the theory, and that's what gives you moksha. Now, so in Pitrulok, then what happens is that three generations of our ancestors are kind of out there, and we have some kind of relationship with them, which is what we are doing with our Pitrupaksh pujas, everything. This is the belief, which is why our bodies are not considered important. In the dharmic way, you notice we cremate the bodies, right? Unlike in the Abrahamic way, which is Islam, Christianity, where you bury the bodies. Because there the theory is you have only one life, the body itself remains buried, and then when judgment day comes, the body itself will rise, which is why they say rest in peace. So you rest in peace till judgment day, the body itself will rise, which is why you have the concept of the undead, which is if they have risen before judgment day, right? Whereas in the dharmic way, we cremate the dead because the body is not important. There is some karma of the body that has to go back into the earth. Your soul is important, and your soul has various journeys to take. So the purpose of your life is to wipe out those debts, find balance. Now, then you live your life in a different way, right? It is not, you'll not get moksha just because you worship a particular god. It doesn't work that way, right? Because even gods are subject to the laws of cause and effect. They're subject to the laws of karma. You remember at the end of the Mahabharata, Lord Krishna was cursed by Ma Gandhari, right? And what was Lord Krishna's reaction to that? Ma Gandhari was a woman, was just a human being, right? Lord Krishna was God himself. A human being cursed God. What did God do? What did Lord Krishna do? He didn't say, how dare you, this blasphemy. No. He told Ma Gandhari, Ma, as you wish. Right? Because even the gods are subject to the laws of karma. Right? That is the belief in the dharmic way. So all of us also, what happens to us is in our own hands. Now if you think about it this way, it in a way empowers you. Why do you need to be afraid of death? You have to do what you have to do to find balance in this life. If it doesn't work, you have a next life. Right? But try and do as much as you can in this life because the purpose is moksha. So you can get into the dark thing, but not get into a dark mood about it.
Got it.
You getting my point?
I think you need to learn more about darkness in order to learn more about the light.
It's when you make it this massive thing, when you put the attraction of the forbidden on it, that's when it appears larger than it actually is.
I have a very slapping, unrelated question for you, but I'm just gonna throw it at you.
Throw it.
When you were writing the Shiva trilogy, did you see him or her in your dreams?
Bro, it was much more intense. And I've said this often. I actually see that universe. I describe what I see. It's not my imagination in my books. I've written 10 books, okay, over 12 years. And my books are relatively long. You've read them. They're 400, 500 pages. They're all interconnected, man. Like the Shiva trilogy, it was, 3 books interconnected. Ramchandra series is a 1500-year prequel to the events of the Shiva trilogy. There are things which I wrote in Immortals of Meluha, which was published in 2010, which have been tied up in War of Lanka, which is published now, 2022. There is no way I can claim that I planned all this. I'm such a genius, that it's all my creativity. That's nonsense. It's not true. I won't even claim that, and it's not true, right? I actually kind of see the universe. I see them. And in many ways,
while you're writing,
while I'm writing, and in many ways, that parallel universe is more real than our existing world. Because right now I can see you, right? We can shake hands, but I don't know what you're thinking. I can't feel your emotions, right? But in that parallel universe, I can. It's like I'm a fly on the wall, but I can feel their emotions. I can hear what they think. I can see them, and in my books, essentially, I describe what I see.
you'd done this podcast with Vishal Gonda also way back, and that's where the first time I got to know of you outside of your books, and that was my first instinct towards having you on this show as well. You spoke about the intuitive net, that all knowledge exists around us and we're pulling out pieces of creativity and knowledge from around us, and it made so much sense to me, and that was the first time I'd ever heard that. I'd always felt that way, but I'd never heard someone else articulate it that way. Could you articulate it once again? I've made you do this on this show only.
No problem at all. You know the left brain, right brain theory, right? And our modern education system is completely geared towards the left brain, the rational brain. I'm not deriding it. It's important, right? But our ancient Gurukul system, the Pathshalas, didn't just focus on that. They focused on the right brain as well, because that's a seat of creativity. That's a seat of instinctive learning. That's a seat of the goddess. And there is no kind of step-by-step logical process. It's a path of the goddess, right? You kind of just, it's a bit like, you train that muscle and the blessing just comes, right? And things which you do which are creative, right? So painting, playing an instrument, anything, right? And then have to be something which, you'll put out in the world or people will pay money for. It can be only for you, right? But you must do those things because it trains your instinctive mind, right?
And do you think prayer is one of those exercises?
Prayers is one of those things. Meditation, pranayam. Our ancestors believed all that trains the instinctive mind.
To catch things from the intuitive
To catch those. And the thing is that the intuitive mind is what can pull out miracles, right? You get some leaps in learning. When you're doing logical learning, it's like you can't do from the first standard to graduation within 1 year, logically, right? There may be a few geniuses, but most people will have to go through that grind. But when you're doing instinctive learning, like for 30 years, there'd be nothing. And then suddenly in 1 year, you've learned enough for 60 years, right? Because it's a path of the goddess. It's just the way it is, right? And for me, my books kind of appear that way. Think about it. I had written no fiction before Immortals or Meluha. You know that. Absolutely nothing. Till today, after 10 books, when my school and college friends meet me, they still say, "Sach bata, actually kisne likha hai?" Because they refuse to believe that I've written it, right? And I'd shown boss no characteristics of being creative when I was young. I was as left-brained as they come. BSc mathematics, I was hyper-competitive. I was active in sports, boxing, gymnastics. The only kind of creative thing I did was I was the lead singer of our band in I'm Calcutta, but I never wrote music, right? So it was never the right brain. And then suddenly Immortals of Meluha comes and I have 10 long books, in 12 years. If someone had told me this 20 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it, that I would do this.
Why do you think Shiva chose you?
I don't know, man. I think he tends to pick those who need him the most, I guess. I certainly feel I'm not worthy enough for it. I certainly feel that there are many writers far better than I am with far better talent. Why I got picked, I don't know. Why I received this blessing, I don't know.
You think about this? Lucky.
Yes, especially because, because there's this thing in my mind all the time that I need to honor this blessing, right? Because it is a blessing. I don't know where it comes from, right? And if it's a blessing, it can stop anytime, right? So I need to get as many of my books out before the blessing stops. And
why do you think it'll stop?
Because I can't explain where it comes from. And and there's this there was this phase in my life where people keep asking writer's block. I've never faced writer's block, okay? Except once. These 10 books, like I said, relatively long books, relatively intense books, right? Except once where I actually thought the blessing's gone for like 2-3 months. And that was in my personal life, perhaps among the lowest phases of my life. I was really troubled. at that time. And I don't really speak about it much. And the worst thing is to make a fetish out of, oh, I'm depressed, someone come and help me. No, I mean, you need to handle it yourself and within your family. And there was, for me, like I was saying, when you're in these really, really, like, it cannot get any worse kind of situation. It's essentially the people you love and the things to do that you love, which is what keeps you going, right? I'd lost some of the people that I love, but I still had some of them around, and we are sticking together. But suddenly, I was writing Raavan at that time. I was in the middle of it. Man. Just stopped coming. I mean, I would open the laptop and there was nothing. I couldn't see anything, and I thought it's gone, right? And that to me was even more of a blow. That shit, I'm going to lose this also now. This was one of the things that kind of kept me going. And there's this thing that's there in the dharmic way, the value of emotions, right? That don't deride emotions. There's a value to it, right? That it's something which brings out deeper things. And I'll tell you the story of what happened, of how I came out of it, and you understand the value of emotions. My twin brother, and obviously he was in as devastated a state as I was, and you know how men are when we are completely out of our mind. We like to do brainless things. So we were just watching TV and randomly surfing. I mean, you don't even know what you've seen after 2 hours, but you're just, I don't want to think anything. I just want to. And a channel came up. There was this song, and I know why I told Ashish that stop. I want to hear that. And it was a song I'd heard before. For some reason, like, the initial bars just had an impact on me, and I downloaded it on my phone, on the music app that I have. And that evening I went out for a walk, and I don't know why I didn't start a playlist. I was in the park next to, I stay in Lower Parel in that Lodha Voltas complex. So I went out for a walk in the park, and I didn't say a playlist. I just said play songs. And how this app does, the Amazon app, is it starts from the latest song if you don't select a playlist. So it started with that song. And those first few bars, I listened to it and I just started crying, right? And for 1 hour, I was walking round and round in the park. People say I was crying continuously, right? And it's just like the first 10 seconds. Listen to it again and again and again. And zrrr karke, I started seeing things. And like the next 3-4 chapters came out. And I think perhaps I came up, started writing, and perhaps among the best writing I've done, right? It's when Raavan, when he discovers that the love of his life, has been brutally killed. And to me, I was, how we are taught in our culture, when you don't cry, control yourself. I understood the value of emotions at that time. That let it flow.
Yeah.
And especially in the worst phases of your life, perhaps if you let it flow, it'll pull you out. In the worst phases of your life, it's only the miracle of the goddess who can just pull you out of it, like a mother.
Yeah, I think one of the, I don't know if you want to call it a tragedy or one of just the strange aspects of human life, is that pain creates creativity. And silence also creates creativity, but pain creates some solid creativity.
I have a discussion on that in War of Lanka, where Raavan and goddess Sita are talking. And he says that actually grief is the root of greatness.
That's so true.
And his logic is this, that look, happiness can never be about the external world, right? Happiness is essentially internal. You just make a choice. I want to be happy. Where in some ways you are almost detached from the world, right? And of course it's Raavan, so he has his own approach to it. He says that happy people are in a way like they're like drugged out. They just convince themselves that they're happy, and they're happy. It doesn't matter what happens in the world, right? Whereas grief-stricken people are those who are unhappy with where life is. And that's what gives them the energy to want to change it. And that's what makes them great, right? And they think that if they change things around them, they will find happiness. But happiness can never come from the outside in. It can only be from the inside out. So they change things and they realize, I'm still not happy. So they keep trying to change things and I'm still not happy. And that's what makes them great. And he says that often, in our way, you must have heard of that wonderful line from Raj Tarangini of Kalhana, that when fate is about to bless you with the greatest of glories, is also when retreating misfortune curses you with even more grief, right? And out there it was said that it's the way the universe balances itself. If you're going to be great, you have to be willing to suffer as well. It's the way the universe balances itself. And Ravan's point is, perhaps we've confused causality, that we assume that great people have to suffer grief. And actually it's the other way around, that because you're grief-stricken, you become great. Because you're unhappy with life, that's what gives you a fire to keep working, right? And that's what makes you great. And you think that change will make you happy. But the world can never make you happy. Only you can make yourself happy. But the moment you become happy, you stop feeling like changing the world. Then you can't be great anymore. So the entire point is you got to pick one of the two. Either be great or be happy.
Wow. Why do characters like Yamraj exist in our history or in our culture? Is it a way of depicting what death is and the nature of death? Or do you think these were real beings?
A bit of both. I genuinely believe that they were real beings. But if you think about it, do you notice something interesting? Yamraj is also called Dharmaraj. That death and dharma, are in the same being who takes us aboard.
Gauranga Das
And he
on this
was-
show said that life is preparation for
For a
the
good
exam
death.
that is death.
For a good death. Yes. And that is the purpose of life, to have a good death. And it was believed that one of the interpretations is that in some ways Yamraj was the first mortal, because then he went into Pitrulok and then therefore takes us there, right? And you explore death in a way, and Socrates had it right. It's one of the greatest blessings for humanity, because imagine if you are living forever with no death at all, but you didn't have the spiritual wisdom of God. Imagine what we would be like 500 years later, how bored we would be with life, and what would we be doing, right, with life? Or if we live for 1,000 years, and what is 1,000 years in the great scheme of time itself? And is death a way, time for the soul to sleep and reevaluate and recharge? Just like sleep is a time for the body and the brain to rejuvenate and recharge. And is that why Yamraj is also Dharmaraj, right? That because essentially the soul will find moksha when it's in balance on dharma, right? So death kind of gives you that opportunity for your soul to evaluate and to step back and to think about, okay, what do I need to do in the next life, right? So that I can find moksha. And Yamraj, by allowing us to do that, is keeping us close to dharma, which is why he's the Dharmaraj as well.
What makes you feel like it was an actual being? And if it was an actual being, the next question is going to be about aliens or beings from other places.
Okay. So it's like this. Look, do I believe that aliens could exist in the universe? Hell yes. Is there any evidence as yet of it? No. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right? I think it was Carl Sagan who said that if we are the only life forms in this entire universe, it's an awful waste of space, right? Because Earth is not even a rounding off error. It's like, why create such a massive universe for just so much life? So there are two aspects to this. One, is there a form of life that exists on different planets, on different galaxies, on different solar systems that we haven't come in contact with? And could we in the future come in contact with it? Could Elon Musk succeed and make us an interplanetary species, and therefore we could interact? That's one approach to it. Another approach could be that, are we in contact with life forms already? It's just that we don't recognize it. Is the earth a living being? Is the sun a living being? What is life? How do we define life, right? And our ancestors believed that there is consciousness in everything, right? And consciousness means life, right? That was what our ancestors believed. Our definition of life is a little different. The modern biological definition. So we would classify plants as life, but we wouldn't classify stones as life. We wouldn't classify the earth as life. We wouldn't classify the stars as life. But our ancestors would classify them also as life. So it could be one of both. There could be alien life forms. I certainly believe there are alien life forms. Like, it's impractical to think we are the only form of life there is. I want to raise the second possibility. Could it be that actually we are in touch with forms of life already? We just don't see them as life.
Like,
which
what
is
would be
Mother
your
Earth
guess?
or the sun. Are they forms of life?
Okay.
But we don't see them as life. Our ancestors certainly believe that they were forms of life as well, which is why we see the divine in everything. Because our ancestors believe that anything that has consciousness has life.
From our epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, are also probably extended to the Puranas. Where would you say that, okay, this story likely had some alien characters? These seem like alien characters.
There is a story I'd read in one of the Puranas. There was a king of Kalinga who, the story goes, that wanted to find a good groom for his daughter. So he wanted to meet Lord Brahmadev. So he went to Brahmalok. And there are various levels of existence, right? Brahmalok, Vishnulok, Shivlok, where the concept of time is different, right? So one of the theories is when we say Satyug, Treta Yug, Dwapar Yug, Kali Yug, and you must have heard it's like lakhs of years. And many colonial era Westerners used to laugh at that. How can you have lakhs of years, right? But now, of course, the universe is in lakhs of years. But there are various levels of existence. So the human concept at human level years is actually 26,000 years, the entire cycle. Satyug, Treta Yug, Dwapar Yug, Kali Yug. And then the entire cycle back. But the same Satyug, Treta Yug, Dwapar Yug, Kali Yug at a Dev Lok level is different, at a Lord Brahma level is different, at a Lord Vishnu level is different, Lord Shiva level is different, but it can be in multiple lakhs of years. So the story goes, this king went to Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma was busy in some other work. So he waited for some 2 hours or a few hours. And then after that, he spoke to Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma said that, what have you done? Why did you come here and wait? Because you may have spent only a few hours out here, but in Earth, hundreds of years have passed, and everyone you know is already dead. So, and this was written, in the Puranas. It's like hundreds of years ago. And we know in modern theoretical physics, if you travel at the speed of light, time slows down. So, I remember I'd read this and I thought, like, is this time travel? It's very intriguing. But it's there in our Puranas, this story.
Time dilation.
Absolutely.
Okay. One more pre-planned question for you, Amish Tripathi. We got to talk about little bit about Kalima or generally Mata energy. You used the word divine feminine, I think you said. Sacred feminine. In your studies of Tantra, why is there a relation to divine feminine? And why is there even a cultural relation?
Because it is believed in the dharmic way that the most powerful energy source is Shakti, is the divine feminine.
Why not Shiva?
It is believed that it is Lord Shiva and the mother goddess together who give us the... because one of the beliefs is that Lord Shiva without the feminine principle does not have that life force. So, but the feminine principle also needs Lord Shiva as well. Otherwise, it doesn't have direction and control. So they need that. That's the balance that I was speaking about. But you'll find in many of our stories that that there are asuras who are beyond the Tridev, beyond the 3 gods, and then the mother goddess has to come. Like we are shooting this in Vijayadashmi, and among the stories that are linked to the Dasara is, one is of course that Lord Ram killed Raavan on this day, but the other is of course that the goddess killed Mahishasur, on this day, because he was an asur who was beyond the Tridev, and therefore the mother goddess had to come to kill him. So the belief is that the greatest force is with the divine feminine, but We all know the story that what happened with Kalima. Once she had killed Raktabij, she lost control. She started killing even non-asuras. And then Lord Shiva had to kind of calm her down. You know the story, right? He lay down, she stepped on him, and then she immediately kind of realized and then stepped back. So it's believed in our way that the greatest kind of power is with the goddess, which is why the Sanskrit word for power is Shakti, which is the name of the goddess. Which is why in the Indian way, the feminine is respected so much. And in our ancient way, women are respected a great deal.
In Isha Foundation, there's a separate Bhairavi temple. I think they call it Linga Bhairavi, if I'm not mistaken. And this energy that I felt in the Mata temple, basically in Isha Foundation, it was crazy. It was something new, felt like crying, felt like healing. And then when I step out,
flowing through you.
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't end up crying while I was in the temple because there were too many people around and my toxic masculinity didn't allow me to cry in public. But these Isha Foundation volunteers came up to me and said, it's believed that when you want spiritual growth, you go to the Dhyana Linga, which is the Shivling that they've built in the Isha Foundation. And when you want material growth, you pray in the Linga Bhairavi temple. And I don't know why that idea just stuck with me. I don't know why Shakti is linked to material growth, but one thing I know about material growth is only when you've ticked off those boxes will your mind and heart be inclined towards spiritual growth. And they say that if you want faster material growth, you ideally should pray to Mata. And I kind of have seen that in my own life. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm sharing like an experience. Like, since I've been inclined towards Mata prayers and Mata-based mantras, things have started to happen much faster in my life.
Interesting.
I think we've spoken to Ishtadev, which is like when you close your eyes and you think of God, which is the God you see. So different Hindus have different Ishtadevs. And they say that it changes based on where you are in life. For such a long time lately, it's been Mata for me, and this phase has been in sync with the fastest career growth I've seen also.
Interesting.
And the faster and further my career is growing, the lesser I'm interested in career growth. And the more I'm interested.
That's the entire point.
Like Mata, the power just takes you further.
There is certainly a part of Mata worship which is out there. So Goddess Lakshmi and Prakriti itself, the Shiv Prakriti principle, the Purush Prakriti, Lord Shiva and the Goddess principle. So Prakriti is nature, Goddess Lakshmi is the goddess of bounty. So yes, that is a part of material growth. But Goddess Saraswati gives you knowledge, and Goddess Parvati, Goddess Shakti gives you the power and the strength.
Wouldn't you kind of think that maybe even these are material blessings?
Yeah, in a way, no doubt. But the thing is that it kind of then goes back to the the four Purushartha principle that I told you of. That if you chase one at the cost of the other three, that doesn't really lead to balance, right? So I imagine, again, I'll use an example which many youngsters could understand right now, right? That you want to build up your body, you want to do weight training, but say you're training only your right arm all the time. You're doing nothing on your left arm. You're doing no legs. You're doing no back. So you might get some real massive muscles out here. Is that a healthy body? Of course not, right? You have to have balance across all muscle groups. That is the principle of the four Purusharthas, that essentially you have to need balance across all. Only then is it a successful life. And the greatest lessons you will draw in times of difficulty. That what are the kind of friends you've built? Who are your loved ones? How much wealth, power, fame you've built? What is your spiritual strength? What is your wisdom strength? Because when it's only when you face resistance, when life is giving you one blow after another, that you realize, I've become strong enough, right, to handle these things. Then perhaps you're ready for the next phase, right, of growth. So that it comes back to the point I said earlier, that there is value to challenges.
Okay.
And essentially, look, it's right. If you're building up your body, It is to face. It's not just about looking good. It's to be healthy, right? So that you can face whatever challenges that you come. How do you know your body is healthy enough? When you face those challenges, your body is strong enough to handle it, right? So how do you know that you are an entire package in terms of dharma, in terms of artha, in terms of karma, that when those challenges come, you're able to handle it, right? Without falling apart. There are so many people, when tragedy strikes, they fall apart, right? And I think that is one, it's a test in a way.
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be, even when you're going for artha, dharma, anything, find that balance. It's all about balance in the dharmic way. Just having wealth but destroying your health for it, destroying your spiritual balance for it, destroying your relationships for it, is not worth it. What's the point of that money, right?
Have you had any experiences with this Mata energy in a temple or just through your learnings? What have you figured about it? Because I'm trying to figure more.
Can I say one thing? Honestly, and I haven't really spoken about this too much. I mean, I'm a very, very deep devotee of Lord Shiva. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm a little scared of the goddess, to be honest, right? And I've had people I respect a great deal, people I look up to as gurus, female gurus, and many of them telling me, that you need to explore the goddess. The goddess wants to come to you. And I have some fear in my mind. And one of my family members, my bhabhi, is deep into goddess worship. And she's really brilliant at it.
Why is she deep into goddess worship?
I don't know. She's always been that way, right? She's, I mean, there are some people who get scared of goddess Kali, for example. There are many. My bhabhi, Bita bhabhi, actually finds her very beautiful. Right?
Yeah.
She's very comfortable. She has no sense of fear. So I'm wondering if I need some more growth to lose that fear. It is like, I'm comfortable as long as I feel Lord Shiva is there. You know what I mean? And this is among the things that's there in India on goddess worship. There's some people who just feel a little afraid. I'm one of them.
And it's coming up in this conversation also.
And it's coming up in this conversation as well. There's this friend of mine, who's born a Christian and then got into yoga, then deeply into Lord Shiva, and now deeply into Mata worship. And she called me out of the blue after some 5-6 years. Amish, you need to explore the goddess. The goddess wants to contact you. I just needed to tell you this.
Even I'm feeling that, Amish. So goddess wants to contact you.
And I can't explain it, but I actually get afraid because somewhere in my mind I feel there is too much power, and in some ways I feel safe with Lord Shiva. I don't know if that makes sense.
No? Have you ever thought of the source of this fear?
I don't know, man. It's strange because even my mother is deep into goddess worship, right? And I love her. My mother is like my, among my greatest joys is just lying down with my head on her lap. I feel, very nice and peaceful. My mother's, from the Katyani, so she's deep into goddess worship. But I don't know why. Sometime in life, I'm sure I will find the strength to get into that. Right now, one still feels a bit of fear. Yeah.
Maybe it's tonight.
No, Lord Shiva's around.
Kind of linked to Mata is this whole concept of Asuras, Danav, Demon. It's always there in the Mata stories, one way or the other. And honestly, it's there in all the Puranic stories, etc., etc. Again, the question to you is, firstly, if the Puranas are actually based on history, and I believe they are, you believe they are, the listeners believe they are, why were Asuras and Danavs only concentrated around the subcontinent? And they should have probably been there all over the world. And either way, even if they were just concentrated in the subcontinent, what or who were the Danavs or Asuras and all these demonic entities in all our stories?
In the ancient way, actually, we had concepts of geography that went beyond the Indian subcontinent. So there were various Dvipas. So actually, they existed outside the subcontinent as well. Among the things also that's happened in the modern day is we Indians have imbibed many of the Western approaches. The simplistic good, evil, black, white. So we tend to see asuras as quote unquote demons, which is a very loaded word, right? And which is why, if you ask around, many Indians would actually think that, asuras would have green skin and with horns and, maybe a trident.
I mean, even in Amar Chitragatha, it's depicted like that.
Yeah. Or a trident. Trident was seen as something negative in the Abrahamic way. I mean, in the Indian way, Lord Shiva is a trident, So, and in the Puranas, it's not that asuras are described as green-skinned and with horns. There were asuras who were very good-looking. There were asuras who weren't good-looking. There were devas who were good-looking. There were devas who weren't good-looking. There were asuras who were very good, like King Bali. There were asuras who weren't that good, like Mahishasur. There were devas who were very good, like Lord Agni. There were times in which the devas did not do such good things, like Lord Indra at times, right? We see Shurpanakha in a certain way, from the Ramayana. When actually Shurpanakha was actually quite beautiful, right? The way she's described. We see her with claws. That's what we think Shurpanakha means. But actually, Shurpa means a winnowing basket. And if you see the ulta side of the winnowing basket, it's very smooth like this. And Nakha means nails. So Shurpanakha literally translates as manicured nails. Okay, so she was fashionable, right? So we've imbibed many of the Western things and we are using that lens to judge a very nuanced approach. Many have forgotten this. Is there in the Puranas. The Devas and Asuras were actually cousins, right? Or stepbrothers in a way, because two different mothers, but the same father, right? So it wasn't, that God, devil, the Western approach, the Middle Eastern approach that we have absorbed. It was very nuanced in a way. And which comes back to the point that I made earlier about that we didn't have a judgmental God who will decide that because or a jealous God, you worship me, so you'll go to heaven. You didn't worship me, doesn't matter how good you are, you'll go to hell and burn in hell for eternity. It wasn't like that. And that, at least to me, sounds a little childish, right? Our approach was, it's all in your hands, right? You will decide what happens with your life. And if you are an Asura, as Prahlad was, right? But you do noble deeds, you will receive the blessings. If you are a Deva and you do negative deeds, yes, you will face the consequences of it, right?
Do you think it was just like a different sect of people? Like
they were that is the point, that they were cousins, right? And there were times when the Asura was most powerful. There were times when the Deva was most powerful.
I think with you, once on one of our past episodes, we discussed that Asura could very well also kind of be linked to Ahura.
Yeah.
Which is the Persian concept.
Persian god. And do you know that the opponents of the Ahura, you know what they were called? In not Islamic Persia, Zoroastrian Persia. Daiva. So, but they saw it in a much more nuanced way. All our ancient cultures saw things in a nuanced way.
Basically, maybe this could have been that when we say the word Deva, we were referring to the kings or the evolved
is
people
that which has
India.
light. Okay. Right. That was the approach. But and Asuras are those who were out of tune with what the thing was. Asur. I mean, that was one of the concepts. There are various concepts.
Maybe truly it was just India versus Central Asia.
Possibly. But in ancient times, actually, Central Asia was pretty Indic in its approach. Uttar Kurus, for example. And they were, among the oldest Lord Ganesha temples, etc., are actually all in the steplands in Central Asia. You know what the Turks aren't originally from Turkey. You know that, right? They are originally from Central Asia. So what is the Turkic word for idol? Do you know? Idol as in Murti? But. Where does the word but come from?
I'm assuming Sanskrit.
Buddha. Okay, because the Turks were actually Buddhists. They converted to Islam quite late, and they converted to Islam around, I think, 10th, 11th century. So Mahmud Ghazni's probably father or grandfather was Buddhist. Mahmud Ghazni was Turk. Many of our invaders, Delhi Sultans, Mughals were Turco-Mongols. The Delhi Sultans were Turks. They didn't speak Urdu. They didn't look like Ranveer Singh. To us, they would have looked, Chinese. They weren't actually Chinese, but to us, they would have looked that way because they had Mongoloid features from Central Asia. Now, they were actually, many of them were Hindus, many of them were Buddhists. So we'd actually influenced many of them as well, and these concepts were spread throughout. Southeast Asia was Hindu. China, Japan were Buddhist. So many of these concepts had actually spread across the world.
I'd love to know some stories, from some, maybe like a Parsi expert, like a Zoroastrian expert, about what their outlook on Daivas or Devas was.
It would be lovely to know.
Yeah.
And because, even Zoroastrianism is, is a very high philosophy, very intelligent religion. I love exploring their philosophies. And even in that region, for example, there's an ancient tribe in the Middle East called the Mitanni, and they were maybe 2,500-3,000 years ago, and they were almost certainly not Indian tribal origin, but they used to start their treaties with a prayer to Lord Indra and Lord Varun. Right? It's very interesting, how concepts could have spread. Among the most popular religions for Roman soldiers was Mithraism. And where does Mithraism come from? Mitra, so which comes from Zoroastrianism and Vedic Hinduism. So many of these concepts had spread across. And like I said, it was a much more nuanced approach to life. Not a simplistic good, evil, Asuras are demons, all bad, Devas are all good. No, there was nuance across all.
One last question in this Asura Danav angle. In Mahabharata, there's a story about how Bhim kills one particular Rakshasa who eats a lot of food, and then also a human being, like a village has to send Bakasur. What do you think this actually was? It was a cannibal warlord or something?
I think many of them were also probably, allegorical. So for example, you remember in the Ramayana, Lord Ram in the Ramayana kills a Danav in the forest, in the Dandak forest, whose entire body was essentially a large mouth, right? And then how he kills him and then releases him from his curse. And among the allegories that was, this was a man who had no control over his appetite. Right? Are modern human beings that way? Do we have no control over our appetite? We are destroying much of Mother Nature. We are destroying the earth to buy brands that, frankly, which aren't really giving us happiness. We keep changing our phones every 2-3 years. Perfectly good phones. Companies design it that way also, so that they'll slow your phone down after 2-3 years, so you're forced to upgrade. We are keeping on consuming things and destroying Mother Earth for it, and we aren't even finding happiness. So are we, in that sense, that Danav, who've lost control over our appetite? Because consumption cannot be the only purpose of life, right? There's value to it. I'm not denying it, but it can't be the only purpose of life. How do we find that balance once again? I think some of these stories are perhaps allegorical.
Yeah, 100%. I also think that this is not the first Kalyug. There's probably been many Kalyugs on this earth itself.
That is actually true. And in our tradition, yes, certainly. So there's, because there are various Manvantars, and the ages fit into many of those Manvantars. We have a different Ved Vyas in each Manvantar. So yes, it goes through these cycles. Yes.
Yeah. Amish Tripathi, sir, we're at the end of this particular episode. What's your new book about?
This book is War of Lanka. It is the 4th book of the Ramchandra series. As you know, the first 3 books of the Ramchandra series were in a multi-linear narrative. Like Rashomon, the Japanese movie, Akira Kurosawa. I'm sure you must have seen that. Because, look, a story rides on the shoulders of the characters. And if you understand the main characters deeply, then you understand the story in a deeper manner. So the first book, Ram, Scion of Ikshvaku, was from the birth of Lord Ram to the kidnapping of goddess Sita. Sita, warrior of Mithila, from her birth to her kidnapping. And the third, Raavan, enemy of Aryavarta, was from Raavan's birth to the time he kidnaps goddess Sita. So 3 parallel multi-linear narratives, all ending at the same point: the kidnapping of goddess Sita. War of Lanka moves onwards from the kidnapping of goddess Sita up to the death of Raavan and the return of the royal couple to Ayodhya to celebrate the first Diwali. So this onwards is a common narrative. So having understood the three main characters, you can kind of enjoy the main story, and that is the fourth book, War of Lanka. More than half of it is actually the war. So yes, of course, it has a lot of action scenes, but like my typical books, it has philosophical discussions and twists and turns, which will hopefully blow your mind.
One very rude question for you to end this episode, which is that why doesn't Bollywood approach you more, or people like yourself more, to kind of help with projects? Like there's this one trailer that came out of a movie called Adi Purush, which is getting blasted on Twitter, or just blasted generally. And we're living in a country where honestly half-baked movies are getting released. And apparently we have people like yourself who are writing on this deep philosophical level. Why doesn't Bollywood come to you guys?
No, actually there are discussions. So Suheldev, one of my books, Suheldev, I'm producing myself into a movie. And Shiva Trilogy Ramchandra series also, you'll see some stuff soon. So it will come out.
Okay.
There are good guys in Bollywood. Some guys who may not understand it too well. Some guys who do. And there, I'm sure, we're going to have, like I said, one movie we are on already. The script is ready. It's moving into production. And you'll see some stuff on the other stuff too.
One last question. What's worked for you in terms of, technically people my age are your TG, your audience. So what have you noticed as a writer writing for my generation in terms of what has worked in your writing, which appeals to one entire generation?
This is like, hindsight analysis, obviously, because it's not that I planned it. I just wrote, what came to me. But if I do hindsight analysis, I think among the reasons why my book succeeds, and yes, you are right, most of my readers are actually the youth. Older people also read my books, but my TG is largely 30 under. So as young as, even 10, 11, even they're reading my books. A few things. One, they want a good fast-paced story. My books are, and I've been told that even if it's 400, 500 pages, most people finish it in a day or two. They can read through it very fast. Second, I think today's youth want to hear a rational, kind of scientific take on things. So, if we are saying the Ram Setu was built, give me a scientific explanation for how it was built, right? A rational, kind of plausible reason, which is what I do in my book. Because it's not that I plan it, it's just that's my attitude. I tend to look at things I am deeply spiritual, but I tend to also look at things from a scientific, rational basis. I perhaps like to find a balance between my right brain and left brain. And that is perhaps another thing that works. The third thing why I think it works is there's an assumption. And my first book, Immortals of Meluha, was rejected by every publisher it was sent to. And I was told that basically have these Gyan sessions every few chapters. And I kid you not, one of the publishers who rejected it had actually told me, you want to make it mass, you have to dumb it down, right? Because the youth aren't, they don't have the
capacity,
which is bullshit. In fact, among the most intelligent questions I get at LitFest, etc., actually from youngsters, because they're thinking deeply about these issues. So I think they like deeper thinking. I mean, I put clues on my books, the section breaks, the cover has hidden clues, and the Brahmi script, others, which I don't explain. And the only ones who decode it are usually the youth, right? Because they want to go deeper. And the fourth, final thing I'll give, I think the youth want to hear liberal, modern messages, but they don't want to hear it from Western or Westernized people talking down to us. That gets a backup, So some American or, New York Times or Guardian or BBC will come and tell you, you dirty Indians, I will improve you with my superior liberal culture. We're like, of course. Who the hell are you to tell us, right? Anything. But we do want to hear liberal, modern messages, the Indian youth. But they want to hear those messages from our own gods, our own traditions, right? And again, I'm not saying I planned it, but luckily I am deeply proud of our ancient culture. But I think I'm also liberal and and modern, because I actually think our ancient stories are deeply liberal. So I speak of women's rights, I speak of LGBT rights. In Suheldev, I have a gay relationship. I show a gay relationship between two warriors, and it's not a parody. Unlike some Indian movies which make it a parody, they're just two warriors who happen to be in love with each other, right? So I think the Indian youth like that as well, that they are liberal and modern on women's rights, on various other issues. But those liberal modern messages come from our gods, from our goddesses, from our heroes, not from a Western or westernized Indian talking down to us. Perhaps these are the reasons they do well, I think.
Amish Tripathi, sir, I think there's a lot more books left to come as well. And you said that your blessings are going to get over at some point. I think they're going to get over at the moment of your death, because we spoke about death this much. I'm not wishing for you to die.
Thanks,
I'm just highlighting the themes of this episode.
Thanks.
Learning from you always, sir. Thank you for being on the show again.
Thank you.
I hope you had fun.
I had great fun.
Awesome.
You got me to say things I've never really said before. You're good.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Meeting you for the first time in person, and I'm glad we recorded this session.
you.
Let's go have some dal bati.
Done.
Let's
Take care.
go. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
That was the episode for today. Don't have too much to say about this particular episode, but what I will say is that the joy of podcasting is that you really get to explore the subconscious mind and the complete vibe of the person you're podcasting with. Amish sir is very eloquent, extremely good with his words, extremely creative, but at his core, he has this amazing intensity, which I hope you got a glimpse of through this conversation. I've been waiting to do this particular episode with him for the longest time, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Happy to call this man a friend in my life now, and happy to always be learning from his books, the messages within his books, and of course now the podcast that he creates. Some humans are just built to be podcast guests, and this is one of those humans. For more conversations like this, make sure you follow us on Spotify. Every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. Lots more fantastic content coming your way.